Hello everyone, this is Nathan and I want to welcome you to a special book-based interview. Before we get started, I'd like to give context to the interview we'll be having today. In 1983, the country of Sudan erupted into a civil war that would be called the Second Sudanese Civil War. Among the numerous reasons for this war taking place was an effort from the northern side of Sudan trying to Arabize the southern region of the nation, which was mostly composed of people who were not Muslim. In an effort to stay alive, an estimated 20,000 young boys ranging from the ages of 5 to 15 years old fled to refugee camps in other countries, forcing them to embark on a journey that consisted of walking over 1,000 miles in the wilderness of Africa. Of those 20,000 young boys, around half made it successfully to Kenya. Being stuck in refugee camps for years, some were given the opportunity to go to America. Author Mathew is one of these survivors, and I'm honored to sit with him as well as co-author Molly to talk about their book, At Least I Wasn't Eaten by a Lion, a story about a lost boy of Sudan, as well as their foundation, Shaping Bright Futures. If you guys are interested in following their journey after this interview, please check out their website, shapingbrightfutures.org, their Facebook at Shaping Bright Futures, and their Instagram at Shaping Bright Futures 1. Mathew and Molly, thank you guys so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Very much.
Of course. Going to our first question, how did you guys meet?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but when my daughter was in fourth grade, she was doing an essay contest, and she found a book about the Lost Boys of Sudan, and she read that book, and she was just fascinated with the story, and she came running to me, shared the story with me, and I told her that there were several Lost Boys of Sudan who had been resettled in San Diego. And so she got on the computer and researched where she could find any of them, and we got connected with an organization and she asked if somebody could come speak to her class, and Mathew was the one that came and spoke to her class, and he had just returned from his very first visit back home after 20 years. I think he'd been back for a couple of weeks. And so when he was talking to her class and he was telling about his story and reconnecting with some of his family members, he also told about when he had been there, he saw that children were going to school under a tree, and how when next time he goes back, he wanted to build a school. And we just, after he talked, we just started getting together, and we'd go to lunch or have dinner, and we developed this friendship and decided that we were going to do this together. We were going to help him fulfill his dream.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you guys met, and I think it's really interesting how it started off with Abby just wanting to win an essay contest. I think it's funny how life works, where it starts off from I just want to win a competition, and it goes into learning about something that's happening in another part of the world, and you start learning about other people and their stories. And I think that's awesome how Mathew, you were the one to be the person to go to Abby's class and also talk and meet the school, the children that were at the school and everything. And I wanted to ask, what was it like for you speaking to those children and talking about your journey going back to Sudan and just sharing your experience?
It was fun. The kids were really. It's like it became like when we were in Africa, coming here.
Yeah.
We never had experience with snows and how cold it is. And so when we were back there coming here, we were giving orientation, and they could bring a snowball and put it in our hands, and you would drop it because it felt so cold.
Right.
So these kids, my story was like that to them. It's like something new to them, They got used to many American stories, so it was like a new experience. They had to listen to stories about a lion, hyenas,
right.
Things that sometimes you would see in the zoos or through toys. But in Africa, these are stuff that you see in real life. You can get chased by them, or interact with them in a vast land with cows and goats. And so when I told kids those stories, they did like them. It was not like a common American story. It's like something new.
Right.
It just felt like the snowball.
Yeah, that's so awesome, and I can totally relate with that metaphor with the snowball, because my family, they're from Fiji, and it's a very tropical island.
Right.
And sometimes when family visit, it'll be 70 degrees. You know, for us it's a regular day. You wear a t-shirt, shorts are out. They're freezing. They're like, what
Yeah.
is going on?
Yeah.
And I would always tell them like, no, this is normal. Like, just wear a t-shirt, it's gonna be fine. No, like I think I'm gonna get sick if I stay out in the cold too long. And I remember, you know, likewise when I was learning about stories about my family, because they grew up in a village in Fiji and stuff, and you know, they were also living amongst like, you know, animals that they would personally take care of. They had a farm, they walked to school, they would swim in rivers and stuff. Coming, you know, hearing that as a boy that just grew up in Los Angeles, you know, if I swim in a river here, I might get like, you know, radiation or something because of all the pollution that's in the water. So I just think it's crazy, you know, when I hear these stories, you're like, really? Like, you get to just be in contact with nature this much. And I remember my first trip to Fiji, being able to meet my family and being able to see exactly the farm that my family were talking about, the river that my dad and my grandpa swam in. It's really beautiful. You know, I think that's something that you don't really see much of when you're in the city. When you're in the city, it's always noise, it's a concrete jungle, fast-paced business, school, you always have to do something. And when you go from everything to almost nothing, just the silence and the beauty of nature, you know, it really gives you a really different perspective on life in general, you know, about like, what do we really look at? What do we really take for granted? And what do we really want to internalize? And I really think that's great how you were able to offer that to those children that were learning about, you know, the first time probably learning about Sudan and meeting somebody that came from Africa to share a story other than the ones that we hear in history class or anything in school. Going into our next question, Matthew, this is for you. You know, of course, you're a co-author of the book, At Least I Wasn't Eaten by a Lion. You know, what does it feel like to share your story in a book?
It's really something that, you know, in Africa, a book wouldn't be considered like a friend, because you have people who are friends that are with you all the time, the village boys and all that. So coming here and you get to learn through words written on a paper. Where I come from is something, you know, rarely seen.
Right.
And so putting it in a book like that, and I could see my real story getting seen in a paper, not just verbally.
Right.
It make a lot difference, you know.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it even when Molly and I were putting this together. It was not like something that was going to be a full-blown story like this.
Right.
I saw it like something that, you know, I would rather see somebody with writing on getting like some charcoal and drawing something on a bark of a tree.
Right.
You know, because those are the things we get used to.
Yeah.
But when my story really, it becomes something motivational, especially when we open it up to the kids. And we had our illustrator did a very good job of painting those pictures.
Yeah.
And it's like the story is being told in words, but more in a picture. The kids really live it. Oh, why? We would open a page and they would say, oh, why are you barefoot? Are there no shoes in Africa? Why are you like this? So they ask they love flipping those pages. And then the lions hidden in the pages, and they search for a lion. Sometimes when you open up the page, you see words and big pictures, but then when you are asked, do you see a lion? And you will like pay attention more and try to search. And then say, oh, right. And then that became like a very, very motivating, very funny thing in the book that the kids really love. And so one more thing, you know, when I was in a college here, we were told to write papers with references from books written from our villages. And we couldn't find no book. You could search all the libraries. I wouldn't find any book written about my village, about somebody even in my village, or even the whole, like a state or something, nothing. And even the teacher was like, you are not serious, you know. So to have my story in a book like that, it's a lot of fun. And the kids are really, you know, Molly, I don't know how that idea got born in Molly's mind that we write a children's story. All the Lost Boys story are like big chapter book, and it's like the little kid were like exempt from those. So this one really bring the story from the bottom up, you know. And so it's when I saw the book like that, I became, oh, this is what we had been doing all along.
Yeah.
It's just like the way you guys start your organization. You know?
Yeah.
You didn't know like it was gonna be like this. So
Right.
yeah, this is it. Like now, I just got my son. You know, I got married recently, and I have a son. So it's motivating actually that when I go back next time, I'm gonna take the book with me, and when he reaches like a reading age, he's gonna start reading from his dad's story. It's really,
Absolutely. Thank you
really
so much
good.
for
Yeah.
sharing that. Thank you. I think, you know, first off, I just want to say, first off, congratulations on the recent marriage and having a son and everything. That's
Yeah.
amazing. And I also wanted to say, you know, reading this book, I know we see the cover right here, but I don't think that speaks for the personality that this book has. You know, just looking at the illustrations, reading the words, you can tell that it has its own identity. And it's unlike most, I think for me personally, growing up and reading children books, they're mostly about farm animals, you know, like, oh, a pig goes oink, or like a horse goes neigh. That's what I remember. And for this one, it just feels like it's such a personable and in-depth experience where, you know, you see these illustrations, you read, you know, Matthew's story that's in this book, and you just start understanding just how real the situation is. And I was actually going to say, you know, this, usually in therapy, the concept of journaling, where it's like, you know, you pull open a book and you write your thoughts. Most people, when they initially think about something like that, they kind of go, you know, what's the point? I know what's happening. Why do I write it? And I've always heard therapists say the reason it's important to write down your story is because it makes it real. You know, it makes it tangible. It's no longer something that's memory based and is a perspective. It's actual knowledge at that point because you're actually creating something from it. And I really think that resonated with me when you were talking about your story. I think going through, you know, a difficult journey in life is one thing, but to be able to communicate that to other people and not have it just be through word of mouth. By having it be on an actual book, you know, pieces of paper that children can also, you know, digest on their own speed, even adults, they can learn on their own pacing. That makes not only the situation more, it's easier for them to digest as someone from the outside looking in, but I think it's also important because, like you were saying, there were no books about, you know, your village, or maybe not a lot of books out there in the world that talks about the situation that you went through. You single-handedly contributed to fighting that problem. And that's a beautiful thing. And I think this is why I really love how literature encourages sharing different perspectives, sharing these opinions. And I think it's great how you were able to also share that with your book. So that's really great. This kind of goes towards you, Molly, but, you know, what was it like hearing Matthew's story and helping him interpret this into something children can digest? And on top of that, were there any challenges to communicating a story that could be seen as something, you know, quote unquote, maybe too sensitive for children to digest, or maybe something else a little bit too adult?
Yes, challenges, so many, because when we started off on this adventure, we had no idea what we were doing. Like, we still have no idea what we were doing. He presented me with, like, that he wanted to put his story in a book form and get his story out to the world. And we made a few attempts and quickly realized that that was out of both of our wheelhouses. And so I asked him if he would be open to putting it in a children's format. And because I'm a teacher and I had my kids were little at that time, and that's all I was doing was reading children's books. And so I was like, well, let's try doing that. And he wasn't really big on that idea at all. He was quite resistant to it. But I was like, just let's see where it goes. And so we jumped into this whole process, not knowing anything about children's books, and like you should have a certain word count, and like the illustrations, like if you open up children's books, they're bright and vibrant, and it's actually my cousin that did the illustrations. Oh, wow. She was visiting us, and she was just doing these doodles, and I was like, you are so talented, would you be interested in illustrating? And yeah, sure. Again, we had no idea illustrating a story, how long that will take, and all of these drawings are just hand drawn. There's no AI in there. She hand drew everything, and so she created these stories or created these pictures, and I started writing the book, and then we had to try to fit it all together. And we even, like the dimensions of the book, we didn't realize that most children's books aren't in this format. So when we went to go publish, like we realized we'd done it horizontally instead of vertically. We're like, okay, what do we do with that? Do we add color to it? And so like we kind of went against everything in children's books, and that's why it took us, it's been almost a decade since we started this. And so finally we just had to, we're like, we got to take the plunge and just see if the world will take what we have, even though it doesn't fall into all of like the acceptable, normal children's book criteria.
I definitely think you made the right choice by fighting those norms, because I think this book has a unique identity, and I think it needs to have a unique identity because of what it covers. I think there's, talking about a different culture, talking about a different sense of identity, talking about hardship, to fit that in acceptable norms for a children's book. Sometimes I feel like you have to like make a choice. Do you want to make the best impact that you feel like you can make with people, or do you want to make the acceptable impact, which might be less? And I'm really happy that you guys took that route where you kept on fighting, you kept on working hard to create something that just felt more personable, something that could be easier for children to understand, like, hey, this is something different from what we're going to be reading in other forms of literature, especially at a younger age. And that's one thing. I think even though you went against those norms, the message is still universal. Like, for example, there's a part of the book where, Matthew, you're talking about how you meet other boys that are suffering the same situation that you're going through, and you guys used optimism and hope to kind of guide each other to keep on moving to the refugee camp that was in Kenya. Whether these children understand exactly the hardships that comes with that travel, I think they understand the idea of wanting hope, communicating optimism. I think, especially as a little kid, I was a little bit of a crybaby. I would always be, sensitive to anything. If somebody said they didn't like the color of my shirt, I'm in the corner crying, because that really affected me. So I could only imagine, being a younger kid and needing somebody to always be there to comfort me. I always saw that in my friends. When I was at the playground, I'd be crying, and my friend would come and say, hey, it's not that bad. Like, don't worry about it. There's always worse things to worry about. Come on, get your chin up. Let's go play games or something. And it kind of gave that same message that resonated with your story, Matthew, when you're talking to other boys that are also walking on this journey. I'm hungry, or I'm having a hard time continuing this journey. And it goes back to that message of the title, at least you're not eaten by a lion. There's always something that you can always say could happen to you that could be worse than what it is. That itself could be seen as a little bit of a blessing. So use that optimism and keep on going. And I think that was very clear in this book. And I think that is something that I really hope that, and I know it will happen, where children read this and they resonate with that. Like, hey, there's so much more out there in the world that, yes, there are some ugly parts of history that are really hard to take in, but you then see the individuals that choose to move forward and still try to push that optimism. And I think that's the greatest takeaway that I feel like anybody can get from that. And I feel like this kind of leads into our next question. This is for both of you guys. But what is one thing that you guys want others to take away from this book? And this can go for children, or this can go for anybody that just opens this book, goes through the pages. What is one thing that you would want these people to leave with after reading the story that you guys created?
The story actually, we would say, is like a unique story from Africa. I don't know how many miles away from where we are. To go to Africa is like you have to take a plane and go over the Atlantic Ocean or whichever ocean you go over, and then it's more than 1,000 miles.
Right.
And so one time someone asked me, how did you come here? And then I tease, I said, I walk. It's like so it's a long distance. So to have a story from far away being told here to people, like especially kids, at least the adult know more about the world, but the kids, they don't get to know that, So like we said, this is my story. It emanates from the hardships that I used to live in, and how much my life has changed coming here, and I was telling Molly about when I came here, actually, I came not having finished my high school, and so I had to get into GED and ESL. And I was telling her about, oh, I love those ESL grammar books. They are very written nicely, and they teach you the grammar, and I just can't imagine how much those grammar books helped me, learn education here. Because here, like in America, it's like people go into class by age, but in Africa, you would find an adult like you in first grade, and that tells you how much we don't get to learn. So
Right.
someone will be born and you don't get to. There's no school in the village, or leave alone the whole country. So what I like people to get from that is to learn a bit about Africa, where I came from, understand the hardships that I went through. Is a story of resilience and courage, because walking 1,000 miles, and sometimes you didn't have to eat, walking in the desert with the blazing sun and all that is an experience that is like no other, When I came here, I had the interest to drive across America just to see what it is like. So I drove from San Diego to Iowa, and number one, it was by car, so that make it easy. There are rest area with water and people to help you, tells you where to go. You get to a certain town, there's food, you have money in the pocket. That's a huge difference. Like when we were walking the deserts and in between villages, there was hardly any, and you feed from the tree, you grab things from the ground. Some villages are hostile, and so that is actually like a long story, big, but summarized into that little book to give you a glimpse of what life was with me and with other lost boys. So basically, I give that story to have people learn about Africa and how much people over there are in need of education, and to know also what part of the world I have come into here. So really, it's a story that children can get a glimpse of another part of the world, and in that part of the world, the thing that they want a lot is education. Like for me now, education is like, we used to say many Lost Boys, if you watch the 60 Minutes, that you should find the Lost Boy story in the 60 Minutes also. They vividly tell us what they. We used to say education is our mother and our father. Especially when we got in those classes in the refugee camp, it's like we begin to see things in a different way.
Right.
So that's I would like people to get away from that is to know that my people back there, they are really thirsty for education.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and the book does exactly that.
Yeah.
And thank you for being the messenger, or one of the messengers, to not only come to America, but to also be so open about speaking about your story. Because I'm sure like it must be difficult to sometimes go back and think about the hardships that you went through, but it does come out in a way where when you speak about it, it does create urgency. Wait a minute, there is other things that are only happening in the world, but there is a very bad distribution of resources that's happening all around us. Something that we were forced to go to, like I remember growing up, my mom never once questioned the access to education. It was, get your backpack, you're going to class. And I just got used to it. But but learning about other people's stories about how, especially for you, going back to your village in Sudan, and you realize that education is just not that available. I do believe that everyone needs to get access to education, because it's like a human right to learn about what the world has to offer. And sometimes it's a shame to see that some places don't have that access, and for you to help with this, creating this book and speaking with that message, that's one step closer to achieving that goal of, hey, you know what, maybe we can work together to create an opportunity where everybody can get that same level of education. So thank you for sharing your perspective on this book. And Molly, I also want to ask you, what is one takeaway that you would want other people to interpret when they're digesting this book?
Well, for me, like when I met Matthew and I heard his story for the first time, it was like life-changing for me. Because you're sitting there and you're listening to like his journey when like as a lost boy, and then his journey like once he got here to America. And every time I talk to this man, he has some crazy story that's happened to him that he tells me. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened to you. Like if that would happen to me, I would just be in like a puddle of tears or in the fetal position someplace. And he's so resilient and he's so strong, and all of these like challenges and things that have been thrown at him at life have not brought him down. He just takes each day for what it is, and he's hopeful and excited about it and has gratitude. And I was like, I need to be more like that. Like I have so much, all of us have so much living in this country. We need to have more gratitude. We need to recognize that. We need to recognize that not everybody is this fortunate. And if we're that fortunate, we need to give back. We need to help others. Like it's just not right or fair that a small percentage of the people in this world get all of this. Right? And once your eyes are open to that, you can't close them.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I just learning about you guys before this interview and reading the book myself, it completely did that for me. It really made me look into what I usually take for granted, the things that I look around me and I'm like, oh, that's everyday stuff. But for somebody else, that could be the world for them. And I, these past couple of days, I actually sat my mom down and I explained to her, the stuff that I was researching before this interview. And, I was explaining to her the Lost Boys of Sudan and everything that's happening. And she was like, oh, that's crazy. Like, why are you telling me all this? Like, how did you learn about this? And I said, Mom, I'm interviewing, one of the Lost Boys, like, soon. And my mom was like, that's crazy. Like, what are you going to talk about? And I just couldn't help but just think about, the amount of gratitude that I have for just seeing, my mom also teach me back then as a kid, being like, hey, like always look at other people with the best of intentions, never feel like, you're owed anything more than other people. You guys are all equal. And I felt really good, telling my mom that I was going to interview a lost boy and also communicate that message in this interview, because I do think that is such an important message, especially in today's time. There's so much chaos, so much disruption with how people are perceiving things. And, this could even be with politics or whatever, economics, it could be anything that's happening in the world. But at the end of the day, I really do believe that each person, anyone that lives on this planet, they usually just want that one goal, which is I just want to obtain peace and happiness. And as long as you don't hurt other people and you show gratitude for the things that you have, and understanding when you have plenty to where you're able to share, what you have left with other people. I feel like sometimes, you like something so much, you kind of just take as much as you can. You don't want to share. Like, oh, I like this so much. But, you have to start reframing things to being like, wait a minute, if there's such a disproportionate amount of people that don't have the things that we have in plenty, why don't we kind of reframe things to kind of share things more evenly, distribute things to where people can kind of have the same access to resources that, that we see in other places of the world compared to others. So, everything that you guys just talked about, it's definitely in the book. It's definitely affected me. I know it's affected Bookbase as an organization because it's given us optimism to also go for the things that we want. And, I think it's so great how you guys are just able to be so open about sharing, your story, Matthew, for you personally, but also for you, Molly, to also say, this affected me. And, like, I feel like some people read the story, it would affect them, and then they probably just move on with their life because, it's just a story for some of them. But for you, for it to resonate so much with you to where, you guys started an organization together, you guys are working on it together to help collectively share this message of like, hey, there's so much out there in the world outside of what we initially just interpret. That's a powerful mission. And, I wanted to use this opportunity to kind of segue into our next conversation topic, which is shaping bright futures. I know you kind of brought this up, Molly, but Matthew, I wanted to ask, in your website for this organization, you talk about going on a trip back to your village in Sudan and you noticed that you found children getting their education underneath a tree covered in dirt with somebody that was trying their best to teach them. What did that experience mean for you, and how did you come out of that thinking, I want to be able to help build a school in Sudan?
Yeah, I left my village since I ran away from the war. Was back in 1980, 88, and I had been away from the village from that point to 2012. So that's like a space of how many years?
Yeah.
Like,
It's actually almost
yeah.
around 30 years. Yeah, close to 30.
Yeah. So and of course when I went back there, it's like I took a guy with me from here. I went with another guy from here, like a white guy who had wanted to go. He has a heart to help.
Right.
He worked with the churches around here, so we went together. And what he saw, even himself, he said, Matthew, he was even wondering, like, you want to build a school, but how do we do it? Like, there are no roads. There's hardly anything built, even like something that looked like something with a zinc on it. Nothing. It's just people are in the woods. You can't see anybody. But when we got there, all of a sudden people meet under a tree like this. If they want to have a village meeting or whatever, they come under a tree. So we came there, and then the next day I started walking around, and I found this one school with a teacher, a teacher from the village. He had some charcoals and like a blackboard that was, I don't know, made from trees that were just patched together and plated together and something covered, and then they try to use the charcoal from the burn woods as the chalk. They had no books. They had no like notebooks or even like textbook. And this guy, he claimed to work with the Minister of Education, and the Minister of Education had no books to give to the like far away school in the villages. And so I was asking, like, then how do you do it? No, I just, whatever, I know the ABCDs, and then whatever else I have on my mind, I just tell them, And so then I look at it. I walk around in the village. There's hardly any schools, and these schools also, like they when it rains or when it is very sunny, they don't hold those schools. And so I look at that. I said, okay, yeah, this is the village where I was born, and I just got it almost the way it was when I was here. So something got to change,
Yeah.
And so I went to refugee camp and got the education, some education. Then I came to America. It's like a whole new world. Actually, I came to know the world in America. I didn't know like that there was like how many continents, like there's Europe, there's all this I came to know here. And I saw, like, when I read a book, just like one book, like I told her I fell in love with ESL book a lot, and they're so well written, very rich with a lot of knowledge. It tells you grammar, structure, and stuff. It's like the teacher is, like the book itself is a teacher when I saw it like that, So I can imagine like bringing that education back home there.
Yeah.
And I just see, like, when I told a story, when I was standing before them in the village, a huge gathering of villagers that came out from the wood under a tree, and I was telling them, like, look at this space. This space could be taken up by tall building, whatever. They were like, I was like someone came down from heaven, telling them stuff that are not from this world, and then some of them were like, oh, he's lying. Why is he telling us this stuff? So and then I see that's the difference that education can make.
Yeah.
That you when we came in America, we thought this was even heaven, because coming from a village with nothing, and you come here, and even the airplane that took me, like me, I have phobia with airplane.
Yeah.
But I had to take it, because the distance. So I just think education, like the Western world, if there's something that they can give a lot right now, it's education.
Right.
Instead of food aids and stuff done for us over there, I think education will open up their mind.
Yeah.
And eventually they can do things for themselves.
Right.
It will bring a lot of independence, even like the whole Western world is pouring a lot of resources into Africa. Even though Africa is making the world here something because of raw material and stuff, but over there we feel like there's nothing. We feel like people that have nothing.
Yeah.
So that's why for me I value more education.
Yeah.
The same opportunity I got here, if they can get it over there, I think it will make a huge difference.
Yeah.
It will make a huge difference. Yeah. Molly is they never seen her, but right now they speak her name from what I tell them.
Yeah.
Even my wife, she was telling me, oh, those people there, I see them like they are white, but why they love you so much like that?
Right.
Because they see like the generosity and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think the best thing to give them there is education.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I completely agree. I think one thing that you said that was so powerful right now is you learned about the world when you
Yeah.
came to America.
Yeah.
And yes, it shows just how much education has been something, especially as a school teacher, Molly, how education is so ingrained in our society, where it's so normalized to just go to school and learn about the world. Taking your perspective, Matthew, you come to America, one country, and you learn about everything else that this world has to offer. And does it show that like America has an education system that really teaches a lot of things to people? Absolutely. But I think it also shows a problem where, your education to learn about the world is in one location. And I just feel like that just also illustrates just how much there's a need for education in other places of the world. You shouldn't go to one country to learn about other countries. You should be able to at least, wherever you're raised, at least understand where you are. Something like understanding where, Matthew, you just said you didn't know what Europe was until you came to America. That's incredible, because you're closer to Europe than we are. You guys are only, Europe is just north of you guys. We're across a whole different ocean, but you had to come over here to finally realize, like, wait a minute, north of me is a whole different continent. And I think that's such a great message that you're sharing, where education is important. I think growing up, you think you understand the world. I remember growing up and I thought when it was raining, it meant God was crying. Because that's what I remember hearing that one time from my grandpa and my grandparents, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And then you go to school and it's like, no, there's a water cycle. Clouds take up water, it goes somewhere else and it drops. What the heck? Yeah. All of a sudden I'm thinking, wait, the world isn't that magical. There's actually a lot more science involved into it. And while the wonder of the world kind of like changed for me, as a kid it goes, okay, well now there's an explanation for everything. Now it piques what you were saying, Matthew, curiosity. Wait a minute. How does water work in other environments? How does science work in other situations? And that natural curiosity does lead to people wanting to help themselves, because it's not that they're trying to necessarily do something specific, but it's just a natural human wonder where it's like, whoa, I'm a human being living on this planet. We have all these things happening around us. I have no idea what's happening, but there's a book that can explain all of that. I want to find out what that is. And I think that's such a unique yet universal message that people, I think, get at some point, and education is where you start getting those questions. How do I learn more about the world? Going on to our next question, it says on your website, the primary dream was to build a school for children in South Sudan, but conflicts there made it hard. How were you guys able to pivot to helping these students get further educational opportunities in neighboring countries? Because I could imagine that must also be a mission, working with other countries to say, hey, can I help students come from Sudan to maybe here to learn at your school?
Well, that was a challenge, and that stopped us in our tracks for a really long time, because it was too dangerous, still is too dangerous for him to even go back to his country. So like if he can't go back to his country, how are we supposed to even build a school? Like what do we do now? Like our dream has just been halted. And so Matthew actually, he reached out to like a lot of his lost boy friends, and we had, for a little bit, we had partnered with a friend of his who had started a school in Sudan, and we were helping give salaries to teachers, helping get uniforms for, these were families that had fled South Sudan and had gone to Sudan. And so, we were helping get uniforms for the kids and trying to help that school just exist. But then COVID happened, and just like the world came to an end, or to a stop. Felt like an end there for a while.
Felt like an end, yeah.
But to a stop. And so again, then we were faced with another challenge. Like, what do we do now? And so that's when we came up with our scholarship program, and that's what we're doing right now. Students that have left South Sudan and are in neighboring countries. We were just talking about this on the way up here. Like if they move to Uganda, that's where a lot of our students are, they can't work there. They can't work to support themselves. So they're completely dependent on help from family members or outside help to live, pay tuition, just exist. And so that's where we came up with our scholarship program, that we could still help people from his area further their education.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great pivot. I think, especially like when we're talking about wanting to create an opportunity for students in Sudan, there's a problem with the amount of conflict that's happening in that country. But at the end of the day, there's still students out there that still need help. No matter what's happening in the country in terms of politics or what's happening with the situation there, we still want to help the most that we can. And I think it's great how, you guys kind of zoomed out a little bit, where it's like, okay, well, how can we use resources around the country to kind of help these students still get what they want? And I think it's cool how you were able to work with other Lost Boys to kind of create that opportunity and be able to work with people that were also invested in helping others that were in Sudan. They may feel trapped because they want to get something, and the conflicts are happening right now are just so intimidating, and it's so stressful. To be able to say, hey, why don't you just come here, learn what you can, and then from there, like you're saying, Matthew, open your eyes, see what you can do, and then it becomes a positive cycle where one person ends up helping another person, and that education ends up becoming more cycled and being able to help more people, in general. And I could only assume, like what you were saying, it was so challenging, especially with COVID and just having to understand the context of a completely different country that's so ridden with problems with war and the government, what's going on over there. I wanted to ask, I'm sure working with this foundation in a volatile world isn't easy when you're trying to accomplish your goal. How do you stay optimistic during times where challenges just seem so severe? Or how do you keep that faith that everything's going to work out, especially in a time where sometimes you feel like people are just so conflicted with what's going on? How do you guys really keep that message alive?
Matthew, actually. I always go back to what all that he has had to overcome. And I was like, if he can do that, we can do this.
Yeah, that's great. No, I definitely agree with you. Just learning about Matthew's story, it's inspired me to be not only a better person, but to also understand that, I work at a middle school, like I mentioned. Now when a kid ever, mouths off at me and tries to start something, hey, you know what? We're here to pass on education. I'm here to help you guys. And I think it's such a beautiful story to just believe that, no matter what happens, no matter where you're from, what's going on in the world, if you really care about helping people and you really care about learning about the world, I feel like sometimes life kind of opens avenues up for you. Sometimes we care so much about stressing about the specific answer, but in reality, it's just about attacking the problem. And it doesn't really matter in what direction you attack the problem, but as long as you guys work together in solidarity and you guys try your hardest to just say, hey, this affected me, this really sucks, the situation isn't the best, how can other people help me, or how can I use resources around other places to help these students kind of get what they need. And I think it's a beautiful message, you know, especially for those that want to go for something but they're kind of scared to, or if they're, you know, whoever's watching this, you know, if they're going through a moment where stuff isn't lining up, it doesn't mean that the route wasn't meant for you. It just means that you might have to look at things in a different light. And I think that's such a great message, universally. You know, it doesn't have to pertain to education, but anybody that just wants to follow a specific path in life, you know, I think it's great. It's great that, you know, there's people like there.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, like I like this, like when they compare, like the wealthy part of the world, or the rich part of the world, and the third world.
Right.
I like this when they say, like, you go to a poor country, a person can live with something less than $1 a day, but like $1 here, you can't imagine living under $1 a day here.
Right.
And so what make it easy sometimes helping the third world is that whatever little thing you can help them, it means a lot.
Right.
And so what we do, we're not like scrambling for like huge help or whatever.
We take
But
it
every little thing that people give, or even like a proceed from this book, and then with a lot of people helping, it just means a lot over there.
Right.
It make a huge difference. That kind of simplify a little bit our struggle, and that can keep us going.
Yeah.
But anybody that would come out and say, "Oh, I can do this," like the family that helped with that young girl from with the medical school, you know, that's like a big help. You
Right.
know, like when someone say, "Oh, I'm gonna sponsor that girl that is," and you know, girls' education in Africa is like something you cannot talk about.
Right.
Because girls over there mostly are meant to be married and work
Yeah.
as housewife.
Right.
So it's like I tell Molly, it's like this opportunity we got. Maybe whatever we do, we gotta have like at least a girl included in that.
Yeah.
And so people here are really helping us, keeping us like hopeful about what we are doing.
Right.
And it may be like a stiff hill trying to do something, but I think people are very much in tune with what we are doing. Especially when we go to read the books in school, and kids will be lying down there with their bellies trying to open pages and reading,
Right.
and pointing at picture of a lost boy that was so tired to walk. Yeah, I see it's really encouraging.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine like that we would be doing this interview when we started. And even when you were showing the cover of the book, when we had a meeting, I said, where is this going to go?
Yeah,
So
I would
I
show him
think-
different pieces of it before it all came together, and he'd be like,
I think like
and then I
think
gave him the final copy, and he's like, "This is what we were doing. This is." I was like, "Matthew,
yeah.
yes."
So what I think is like the success is sometimes hidden along the path.
Yes.
You could be here and see like you cannot go the other side,
Yeah.
but if you persist, you're gonna get to a spot that is gonna rocket you further.
Right.
So, and that's what I've seen with what we have been doing.
Absolutely.
And your stories too, the way you guys are starting your business too is
Yeah,
kinda
I
like
think,
that.
you know, that's such a beautiful point, and I think that's such a great universal message as well, where sometimes I feel like people are scared to help others because they don't feel like they can make the biggest impact. Sometimes they feel like it has to be a grand gesture for them to be like, okay, this was worth putting in the effort. But I think you know, what you were saying about creating the story, and I can feel like this with book base, I think intent is the most powerful thing.
Yeah.
If you really care about something, that's all you need to make a difference. You don't really need to have the most money, to have the most resources, to have the most, you know, of something to give. Sometimes it's just the heart and the mindset.
right.
And, you know, I definitely see that with Shaping Bright Futures. And, you know, I think this is just such a beautiful point to kind of conclude the interview here, because I think that message is what I would love people to kind of, you know, go off with, which is you don't need to do a lot to do a lot. You know, you don't need to do a lot of things in life to make the biggest difference. It's the small things. It's sharing your story in a classroom. It's listening to somebody. It's, you know, working together. And, you know, I love that message that you guys share. And for anyone that loves, you know, this interview in the sense where they're hearing Matthew's story and they want to follow along, again, please check out their website, shapingbrightfutures.org, their Facebook at Shaping Bright Futures, and their Instagram at Shaping Bright Futures 1. But Mathew and Molly, again, thank you guys so much for just sharing your story.
Thank you very much.
Really,
Thank you for
Thank
the
you very much for
opportunity.
the opportunity.
absolutely. Thank you guys.
Hi, I'm Molly Wasson,
And I'm Matthew Rick.
and we wrote At Least I Wasn't Eaten by a Lion.
Please tell us what your experience with the reading of the book on the book base.